The mansion in the French countryside is buzzing with activity. The staff is scrambling to prepare for Master Carmen's return, after years of living at his grandfather's house in Paris. His older sister, Miss Victoria, is about to get married, and everyone's guessing that Carmen's arrival means he's back to take his place as heir to the estate. As the servants work, one maid watches the preparations and mutters that if she were Lord Rosemel, she'd give the estate to Miss Victoria instead of Carmen. The other maid looks at her, curious, so the first maid explains that Carmen is nothing but trouble. He spent his school years causing chaos, and everyone knows about his complicated relationships with women. On top of that, Carmen is the son of the late second wife, and there are rumors that she had an affair when they were newlyweds. Even though the second wife is gone, Lord Rosemel still holds onto the memory of his first English wife. He's even hired English servants to keep the connection alive. The maid smirks, saying that there are whispers about an illegitimate child from the affair, but Carmen is still treated like the heir, even though he's not technically related to the family by blood. Meanwhile, a blonde servant, who's been decorating the room nearby, overhears and chuckles. He shakes his head and jokes that if you want real drama, just listen to any noble family's story. He then asks, almost sarcastically, who's been assigned to be Carmen's personal servant. The conversation continues, but just as a maid nearly loses her balance, Edgar, the head butler, swiftly steps in to catch her, saving her from falling. Everyone breathes a sigh of relief as Edgar, ever the professional, offers a calm smile. The buzz in the house picks up again, but now the staff seems to know that things are about to get much more interesting with Master Carmen's return. Edgar steadies the maid as she almost loses her balance, reminding her to be more careful. She thanks him, a bit flustered, while Edgar's eyes catch the painting she's holding. He suggests they hang it in the center of the room. June tells him it's for the charity event to welcome the young master, Carmen. Edgar nods and then notices Jonathan struggling with a decoration. The panel is crooked, so he points it out and tells Jonathan to fix it. Jonathan mutters under his breath that it's fine as it is, but Edgar repeats himself firmly, telling Jonathan to fix it. Jonathan sighs but gets to work, clearly irritated. Edgar walks away without another word, leaving the others to deal with the rest. As soon as he's gone, the other servants start whispering. They agree that Edgar's personality is perfect for handling someone like Carmen. One servant teases that Edgar's always paying attention to June, raising an eyebrow and smirking. Another servant comments that Edgar's been working there for years and knows how to make everything run smoothly. They all know he's got a reputation for keeping things in order. Even Miss Victoria and the Viscount trust Edgar completely and think he's the best choice to take care of Carmen. Jonathan, still annoyed by Edgar's firm leadership, grumbles to himself. But one of the other servants quickly shoots him down, saying there's no one better for the job. Even Miss Victoria and the Viscount agree, saying that Edgar is the only one who can manage the heir properly. Miss Victoria casually mentions that Edgar will be looking after her younger brother, Carmen. The Viscount, while worried about Carmen's temper, seems reassured knowing Edgar will be in charge. Edgar's calmness and control are exactly what the estate needs to handle the heir's return. Edgar reassures Miss Victoria with confidence, telling her the mansion won't be shaken by anyone. He owes her everything for saving him from the nightmare of the factory, and he's determined to do his best for her. Miss Victoria smiles, holding his hands gently. She calls him family and reminds him that this is his home too. Outside, the sound of servants announcing young Master Carmen's arrival fills the air. Edgar moves to open the carriage door, his calm demeanor never wavering. The staff lines up, eager to get a glimpse of the heir. The Viscount and Miss Victoria stand by, waiting for the reunion. The Viscount greets Carmen with a warm tone, mentioning the last time they saw each other was at his grandfather's mansion in Paris 3 years ago. He gestures for Carmen to hand his luggage to Edgar. Edgar steps forward, greeting Carmen and introducing himself as his personal servant. Carmen, with a playful smirk, looks at Edgar, noting his English background and the way he's clearly devoted to the Rosemel family. He shrugs off the formality, saying he's more interested in a glass of water and meeting the cute ladies in the house. Edgar keeps his calm, thinking back to his promise that the mansion won't be shaken by anyone, no matter how much trouble Carmen causes. Carmen, though playful, clearly has his own agenda, but Edgar remains steady, already anticipating whatever will come next. The kitchen is a whirlwind of activity as Maria orders the maids to work faster. The guests are about to arrive. She quickly directs June to handle the chicken dish, even though June isn't officially a kitchen maid. The others are thankful for her help, though, and it makes things run smoother. Edgar walks in and tells June that there are leftover clothes in the laundry room, asking her to check. Maria grumbles, clearly frustrated that June is being pulled away from the kitchen, but Edgar reassures her that Becky will return soon to help. Outside, Edgar admits there's no laundry. He just wants June to take a break. June feels a twinge of guilt for not being able to rest. She believes it's because of all her little mistakes that she can't stop working. Edgar, noticing how hard she's pushing herself, tells her she's the only one he has left after all these years. June, surprised and blushing, stumbles to find the right words, unsure of how to respond. Edgar just smiles softly, telling her to rest until dinner is finished. She agrees, finding a spot against the wall and opening a book. But no matter how much she tries to focus on the pages, her mind keeps wandering back to Edgar's words. She feels a warmth in her chest, unable to shake the quiet weight of his confession. The book in her hands is just a distraction now, and all she can think about is how different things feel since Edgar spoke so kindly to her. As soon as Edgar steps inside, a servant rushes over to him, looking flustered. Apparently, the cuckoo clock in the hallway has gone haywire. The bird popped out at the wrong time and squawked at everyone, which is a bit awkward. This all started after Jonathan knocked the clock while moving a drama prop. Now, the servant is hoping Edgar can work his usual magic on it. Edgar, known for being the go-to person when something needs fixing, doesn't hesitate. He nods and heads over to the hallway to deal with the clock. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Mrs. Maria spots Becky wandering around. She's not happy to see Becky slacking off and immediately asks where she's been. Becky, looking a little nervous, admits she was walking around with the other maids, hoping to catch a glimpse of the young master. Maria raises an eyebrow, clearly not impressed. She gives Becky a stern look and sends her straight back to the kitchen to get back to work. Becky, though a little disappointed, quickly hurries back to her duties. The kitchen falls into a rhythm again, but Maria's watchful eye makes sure no one else dares to slack off. Edgar reaches the door to Master Carmen's room and knocks, offering to help him get dressed for the dinner party. But when there's no response, he figures the young master might already be in the dinner hall. One of the servants confirms this, and Edgar quickly heads to join him, ready to assist with whatever's needed. His mind still lingers on the cuckoo clock issue, but for now, the dinner takes priority. In the dinner hall, the ladies are busy chatting with Carmen about the charity drama happening that evening. They mention how they've heard he's been working on the script since his time in Paris, and they're really impressed by his dedication. One lady comments on the femme fatale character, saying she's intriguing, while another laughs and mentions how Carmen added a part to Don Jose's monologue that isn't in the original opera or novel. The ladies all agree that it shows off his creative side, and they're quite fascinated by his artistic talent. Carmen grins at the compliments, enjoying the attention, and casually explains that the drama is a gift to celebrate his sister's wedding. The ladies nod, impressed, and keep the conversation going, asking him more questions about his life in Paris. One asks if he ever got homesick, while another wonders what it was like living in such a big, busy city. As Edgar walks by carrying a tray of sliced fruit, Carmen replies, mentioning that the ladies in Rosemel are beautiful. He smiles as he says it, making it clear he's comfortable in their company. The ladies, happy to hear the compliment, invite him to take a walk in the garden, saying it would be a nice way to spend the evening. They all seem eager for him to join them, their voices full of excitement. Edgar, standing nearby, watches them with a sour expression on his face, his mood clearly darkening as he hears Carmen talk so casually about the women. He stands there for a moment, then turns and walks away, heading down the hall. In the hallway, he runs into an old butler, who gives him a quick look. The old man casually mentions that he's heard Carmen can be a bit self-indulgent when it comes to women, but adds that Carmen hasn't said anything about Edgar, making Edgar feel a little uneasy. As if on cue, Jonathan passes by and overhears the conversation. He chuckles, shaking his head, and adds his own thoughts. Jonathan jokes that Carmen made such a big fuss to have Edgar as his personal servant, but now it looks like he's in danger of being demoted after just one day. Edgar's face tightens at the remark, but he doesn't say anything. His thoughts start to swirl as he tries to figure out what's going on. He keeps walking down the hall, lost in thought, still mulling over Jonathan's comment. He can't help but feel a bit confused and unsettled by everything. Outside the mansion, June sits with Carmen, chatting casually as his hand rests on her back. They seem to be having a nice, easy conversation, both laughing at something. Edgar, spotting them through the window, immediately hurries outside. He wasn't exactly sure what he was expecting, but this wasn't it. As he gets closer, he sees Carmen handing June a flower with a warm smile, and Edgar's face instantly changes. His steps quicken as he walks over to them. He clears his throat, trying to sound polite, but it comes off a little stiff as he asks if there's anything he can help with. Carmen doesn't even look at him, just waves his hand dismissively while starting to walk away, as if Edgar isn't even there. Carmen casually mutters that he doesn't need any help, his tone light, leaving Edgar feeling a little like an afterthought. Edgar watches him walk off, slightly stunned, then turns back to head inside. He doesn't even glance at June, his face unreadable, and his steps quick, like he's trying to outrun his own feelings. June watches him go, a nervous knot tightening in her chest. She feels the awkwardness in the air and quickly hurries after him, calling his name, hoping to explain what just happened. But Edgar doesn't slow down. Before she can even get a word out, he interrupts her. His voice is cold and distant as he tells her to come inside, saying there's work to be done. It's clear that his mind isn't really there, and it stings. June stands there for a moment, watching him walk away, a mix of guilt and frustration washing over her. She wanted to explain herself, but Edgar's already shutting her out. She knows he's upset, and that bothers her more than she wants to admit. She watches him disappear into the mansion, feeling a weight settle on her chest. All she wants to do is fix things, but right now, all she can do is stand there and hope she gets the chance to make things right later. In the kitchen, the maids are busy preparing for the guests. Mrs. Maria, the head maid, is overseeing everything with a sharp eye. The maids bustle around, setting out trays of tea and raspberry cookies, making sure everything is just right. One maid warns the others to be careful around the kettle, while another adjusts a tray of desserts, making sure none of them get knocked over. The kitchen is alive with the sounds of hurried footsteps, soft chatter, and the occasional clink of dishes. As the maids work, one of the younger ones, a bit too curious, asks about the rules for the drama in the hall. She wonders aloud if only those serving desserts are allowed to go into the hall. The young maid is clearly eager to sneak a glimpse of the young master, who will be sitting in the audience. She asks if they can peek through the curtain just for a moment. Mrs. Maria, not having any of it, gives a quick response and shakes her head in disbelief. She can't believe the maid would even ask such a thing. She's used to their chatter but still expects some level of respect for the rules. There's a brief moment of silence as the maids wait for her to say more, but Mrs. Maria doesn't entertain the thought any longer. The maid assigned to serve the desserts is already planning her return to the kitchen, excited to tell the others about how handsome the young master looked. She's already imagining the gossip session to come. She even chuckles to herself, knowing the other maids will want all the details, despite the strict rules. The kitchen hums with quiet laughter as the other maids focus on getting everything ready. It's a busy but light-hearted atmosphere, with Mrs. Maria keeping everything running smoothly and no one daring to break the rules, at least not yet. Edgar leans against a desk in the kitchen, clearly not okay. His face is tight with worry, and his fingers keep tapping on the surface as his mind races. He can't stop thinking about June and whether she's been swept up by the young master's charm like the other maids. His unease is obvious as he fidgets, trying to push the thought away, but it lingers, making him even more restless. The tension in the room is thick, and he keeps glancing around, hoping for some distraction to pull him from his spiraling thoughts. Just then, Mrs. Maria's voice cuts through the air like a clap of thunder. She's suddenly furious, her sharp tone breaking Edgar's focus. His head snaps towards June, who is kneeling on the floor in front of him, looking at a broken tea kettle. It's clear she's caused some kind of accident, and the mess is all over the floor. Her apron is crooked, and she looks flustered. Mrs. Maria stands over her, hands on her hips, not hiding her frustration. The kitchen goes silent for a moment as the scene unfolds. June, still kneeling, looks like she's about to disappear into the floor. Mrs. Maria doesn't waste time, her voice rising again with a mixture of irritation and disbelief. She gestures at the mess, her eyes narrowing as she scolds June. Edgar can't help but wince a little. The other maids keep their distance, trying not to get caught in the crossfire of Mrs. Maria's lecture. June, who's still on the floor, feels the weight of the situation. She looks up, her face red with embarrassment, and tries to explain herself. Her hands tremble as she reaches for the pieces of the broken kettle, but she can't quite get a grip on what's left of it. Her eyes are downcast, and she apologizes, but she's so flustered that her words come out in a rush. Mrs. Maria shakes her head, clearly not impressed by the explanation. June's clumsy mistake has set the entire kitchen back, and everyone knows it. The tension lingers as June's eyes dart between the broken kettle and the unimpressed gaze of Mrs. Maria. Edgar, still at the desk, watches the whole exchange, a bit distracted but also a little relieved that he's not the one in the spotlight this time. The kitchen continues to buzz around them, but there's an edge to the usual bustle now. June tries to fix her apron, her hand still shaking, but it's clear this isn't the morning she expected. The aprons are a mess, and the footmen need to get moving. The maids stand around, unsure of what to do. One of the male servants voices his concern about his French. The other chimes in, clearly in the same boat. Edgar rubs his eyes, looking tired but determined. The chaos around him feels like too much to handle. He sighs, frustrated. Why does everything always have to be such a mess? With a deep breath, he turns to the maids, asking them to leave it to him. He's got a plan. The cookies with raspberry need to go on a separate plate, and the champagne should be poured into glasses. Simple enough, right? Apparently not. The head maid interrupts, pointing out that the champagne has to be top quality. Edgar, however, is not fazed. Then bring in the fancy stuff, he replies. The expensive ones in the cupboard will do just fine. Mrs. Maria, standing nearby, gives the head maid a look. If anything goes wrong, it's on them, not Edgar. The servants scramble to follow his instructions. One maid races to fetch the good champagne, clearly nervous. Edgar watches them, his mind racing ahead. He sees the apron still in disarray, but at least the cookies are now neatly arranged. There's a lot to do, but he's determined to keep things together. The guests are expecting perfection, and it's up to him to deliver. The head maid gives Edgar a skeptical look. She's not entirely convinced by his plan, but knows she can't do much to stop it now. She signals for the maid to bring the fancy champagne, her face a mixture of frustration and resignation. Meanwhile, Edgar surveys the scene, making sure everything is in order. He quietly thinks to himself, it'll be fine. Everything will be fine. He almost convinces himself. The staff continues to move frantically around, making sure the cookies are placed just right and the glasses are ready. It's not perfect yet, but Edgar is getting there. He wants everything to run smoothly. The tension in the air is thick, but Edgar holds his ground. After all, someone has to keep things from completely falling apart. The head maid mutters under her breath, but does as Edgar instructs. Mrs. Maria keeps her eyes on everything, making sure no one makes any mistakes. The clock is ticking, and the guests are expected soon. Edgar is beginning to feel the weight of the task, but he's not backing down now. It's his responsibility to get this right. The situation is still a little chaotic, but with each passing minute, he feels more confident that things will come together, maybe not perfectly, but close enough. The maids gather around, admiring the tray of champagne glasses. They comment on how nice it looks, nodding in approval. Edgar, looking pleased, smiles. "Didn't you know," he says, his voice light. "No matter how messed up things get, I always manage to fix them." He gives the glasses one last check, making sure everything is just right before he starts heading toward the dinner hall to serve the guests. The maids keep praising him. "You're so trustworthy, Edgar. We're lucky you're here." Another maid adds, nothing would get done without you." Edgar's chest puffs up a little at the compliments. He adjusts the tray carefully, checking for any last-minute adjustments. He makes sure every glass is in place and none of the bubbles have settled yet. Everything looks perfect, and he's ready to take it to the guests. As Edgar turns to leave, he glances down and notices June still sitting on the ground. It's nothing new, but something catches his attention. A flower lies near her, one he remembers seeing Carmen give to her earlier. The sight of the flower makes Edgar hesitate. He feels a small wave of unease. It's just a flower, he tells himself, but it doesn't feel right. He tries to shake the feeling, but it lingers as he stands there for a moment. The busy chatter of the maids around him seems to fade out, and he can't help but wonder what's going on. He shakes his head and steps forward, but that flower still nags at his mind. Why is it there? Did something happen? He can't quite figure it out, but as he moves toward the door, the sense of discomfort doesn't go away. It's like something's not adding up. He shrugs it off, deciding to focus on the task ahead. After all, the guests are waiting, and Edgar doesn't want to be caught slacking. But that flower, the one from Carmen, keeps poking at the back of his thoughts. In the dinner hall, behind the curtain that leads to the kitchen, a few maids sneak around, peeking at the young master. They whisper among themselves, commenting on how handsome Carmen is. One maid remarks that his eyes burn like green flames, while another wonders why anyone would want to live in the countryside when they could be in Paris, enjoying such a handsome man. They also compare Carmen to the polite and refined aura of the Viscount and Miss Victoria, saying how different he is. As the maids continue to murmur, Edgar appears behind them, carrying a tray of champagne. The maids immediately freeze, realizing they've been caught. One of them quickly apologizes, pleading with him not to tell the head maid about their little sneak peek. Edgar walks past them without saying a word, the sound of his footsteps echoing as the maids nervously watch him go. The tension in the air lingers, and they all breathe a little easier once he's out of sight. Edgar walks into the hall, momentarily distracted by the actors on stage. The narrator's voice describes a gypsy with a red skirt and leather shoes, looking like flames, and how the male actor give a flower to the lady and his confession to her. Edgar's mind drifts back to a memory of Carmen handing a flower to June. He is brought back to the present when Carmen turns toward him, acknowledging him as the servant he saw earlier. Edgar responds, offering his assistance, but Carmen quickly dismisses his formalities, requesting alcohol instead. Edgar moves to fetch the champagne tray, trying to maintain composure despite the growing tension. When Carmen takes up a glass, it slips from his fingers and crashes to the floor. Edgar freezes for a moment, he knew it wasn't accidental. The sound of glass shattering cuts through the room, drawing everyone's attention. The guests glance over in surprise, but Carmen remains unmoved, calmly pointing to the broken pieces on the floor and motioning for Edgar to clean them up. Edgar knows it was no accident, Carmen must have let the glass slip on purpose. He can't do anything about it, so he bends down to gather the shards, frustration simmering beneath the surface. Carmen leans toward him, the slightest smirk on his lips, as he observes the situation with detached amusement. He's clearly enjoying himself, almost like this is some sort of game. Edgar stays silent, his jaw tightening, knowing that any response will only feed into Carmen's power play. Carmen doesn't hold back, making it clear that he sees Edgar as nothing more than a trained dog. He's not interested in following any of the house rules or caring about formalities. Carmen dismisses everything, how Edgar has to wear a suit at night, how he's expected to serve like a hotel staff member, as beneath him. It's all a game to Carmen, and Edgar's role in it doesn't seem to matter. Standing there, cleaning up the mess, Edgar feels the sting of the words, but he holds back, refusing to react. Carmen continues, his tone light but filled with condescension, making it clear that the only thing that interests him is attention. He thrives on the desires directed at him, whether it's from an older woman, someone already in a relationship, or anyone else. As long as they're focused on him, it doesn't matter. Carmen's message is clear, Edgar's presence is a nuisance. It doesn't matter how hard he tries to keep his emotions in check, the words sting. But Edgar knows better than to show it. Carmen smirks as he watches Edgar clean up, the power dynamic so apparent that it's almost suffocating. On his way back to the kitchen, Edgar can't stop thinking about Carmen. The way Carmen had stared at him, it wasn't just a glance, it felt like he was looking straight into his soul. Edgar wonders if Carmen had been staring at his green eyes for some reason. Is he trying to mock me? Edgar thinks, feeling annoyed. What a troublemaker. He sighs. How could someone like him be the young lady's brother? That thought lingers in his mind, a confusing mix of curiosity and frustration. As he exits the hall, he overhears a conversation between a lady and a man. The lady comments on something, mentioning a monologue that the young master Carmen wrote. It seems that Carmen is involved in a drama or play, and the thought alone makes Edgar scoff. Why is he always the center of attention? He wonders, his mood darkening. Meanwhile, the play continues, and Edgar can hear the narrator's voice float through the air, speaking about undying love and eternal promises. The words are so dramatic it almost makes Edgar roll his eyes. An oath of eternal love? He thinks, that's laughable. Carmen is just chasing after whatever he wants in the moment, never sticking to anything for long. Edgar walks further down the hallway, already tired of the play and the thoughts that come with it. He's about to reach the corner when he hears the Viscount and Miss Victoria talking. Miss Victoria is clearly upset, asking about the play Carmen prepared for the wedding. From her tone, it's clear she's not thrilled with the story's content, mentioning it's about killing a woman because of blind desire. Edgar can't help but overhear, curious about what's being said. The Viscount tries to ease her worries, apologizing and promising to look into changing the play to something more appropriate. But Miss Victoria doesn't seem reassured. She's scared, not just about the play but about something else, something darker. She talks about being stuck in the mansion with someone wicked, hinting at Carmen's unsettling presence. Edgar feels a chill in the air as he listens, his thoughts turning back to Carmen. It's obvious to him that Miss Victoria is afraid of Carmen, and it's not just about the play. Edgar wonders just how much trouble Carmen could cause with that unpredictable nature of his. He walks on, thinking about the strange tension between everyone in the house, and how Carmen is always at the center of it. Edgar storms into the kitchen, visibly upset, and slams the tray down with little care. The loud noise catches the attention of the maids, who all look over at him. One of the maids, curious, asks how things went with the young master. Edgar doesn't respond immediately, his frustration building, before muttering under his breath about never understanding why nobles treat their servants so terribly. He points out how servants could easily serve poison tea if they wanted. The maid, surprised by Edgar's unusual response, asks what happened to him. Another maid calls out to the group, announcing that it's time to turn off the lights and head to bed, reminding Edgar to blow out the candles when he's done. The maids leave, leaving only Edgar and June in the kitchen. June, focused on the clock she's trying to fix, doesn't notice Edgar's mood. He watches her for a moment before asking if she can repair the clock. June looks up and thinks for a second. She explains that she used to work at a clock factory when she was younger, where it was her job to find defective parts. She smiles a little at the memory, recalling how she and her friends would spend their days fixing things. June stands up from the clock, leaving it behind for now, and moves toward Edgar. She pulls out the acacia flower she had picked earlier, the one she had hoped to give him. She explains what happened with it, saying that the young master had taken it from her, stared at it for a while, and then handed it back. She offers the flower to Edgar, telling him that she knows he doesn't like flowers because they don't last long. However, she suggests he could dry it and use it as a bookmark, so it could stay with him forever. June smiles warmly at him, holding both of his hands. She tells him that he is the only one in her life, her voice full of affection. Edgar, caught off guard, misunderstands her gesture. He quickly tells her there's no need to explain, taking the flower from her and placing it in his book. He mutters a quiet thank you as they both stand in silence, their eyes locked on each other. Edgar, overwhelmed by the moment, leans in and kisses her softly, giving in to the quiet connection between them. After a brief silence, June pulls back a little and asks what happened in the hall. She wonders if the young master had been acting fussy again. Edgar thinks for a moment, still uncertain about the kind of person Carmen really is. His thoughts shift to Victoria's troubled expression when she spoke about him. June smiles reassuringly, telling him that making things right is his specialty. She reminds him of their time working at the factory, where fixing broken parts was always his job. She encourages him to do what he does best, believing that Carmen will eventually come to trust him. June hugs him tightly, whispering that she will always be by his side, offering her support no matter what comes next. Edgar feels the warmth of her words, knowing that, no matter how uncertain things seem, he's not alone. Drop a comment if you want to see a part 2. See you next time.